of the Comic Book Wars podcast. I'm your guest, Nico, and I'm here with my friend, DSComics, straight from the Golden Guys podcast, live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you get a chance to watch him live, they've got an incredibly active live chat. I watch every single week and enjoy every single week, not necessarily on time. Generally, I guess I'm watching on Wednesday, which is why I thought it was on Wednesday. But you guys teach me something every podcast, and generally more than I ever dreamed possible. It's a joy to have you here.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you reaching out to me and asking me if I wanted to do this. And yeah, I'm definitely down because I watch your podcasts usually on replays. I try to catch them live as much as I can, and it's always quality content. Really great interview with Steve Borak. That was phenomenal. And I hope more people will go check that out. There was so much insight from him about the hobby and stuff like that. So when you asked me to be on, yeah, I'm definitely down for it, man. I appreciate it.
It is a pleasure. So that's really why I asked you to come. I appreciate the perspective that you have on the comic market. I think you're one of the best minds in comics, and I want to talk about a number of different things. I guess for those who are not familiar with the Golden Guys, would you kind of let our viewers and listeners know a little bit about what you're doing? I know you have your own channel as well and produce some really cool content. I just finished watching one of your videos while I was driving home, but just kind of let us know what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I got back into the hobby after a long time off, like most of us. And when I came back in the hobby, it's probably 5 years ago, give or take. So I really haven't been back for that long. But very quickly when I got back, I got into Golden Age, and it's not something I was ever in before. So I really don't have a whole lot of experience in what I'm sort of doing now, which is Golden Age comics mostly. I buy a lot of other stuff that I'm familiar with, even from when I was younger. I mean, the superhero stuff. But the Golden Age, 4 to 5 years is sort of when I've gotten into it. But I've been obsessively into it since then. I've been obsessively following the market and researching and trying to learn as much as possible. And it's, I have more experience than some, less than others, but I try to keep an open mind. I try to absorb as much knowledge and experience as I can from others. And I'm just always researching and trying to see what's out there, how the market works. So I started a YouTube channel more recently than that. And, I don't have any background in tech or have any editing. I just put out some content. It's just basically me on the camera or some pre-recorded stuff, not high tech. I don't have bells and whistles, but I just try to put out some of my process here in the hobby. And then as part of that YouTube community, I've started doing a show with a few other guys, JD, Midwest Comic Man, Knights of Old, called Golden Guys. And there's not a lot of content on YouTube about Golden Age comics. And the four of us are all really into Golden Age comics. So we decided to start a show, which we do every Tuesday night at 10 Eastern. And basically just talking about Golden Age comics, because there's not a lot out there. So we're trying to provide something that there's, an outlet for Golden Age collectors or people interested in that. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram at DSComicsPCH. And that's a really great resource for comics generally, but especially Golden Age comics, because there are some really seasoned collectors, dealers, people knowledgeable about the hobby on Instagram, far more in Golden Age than there is on YouTube. So yeah, those resources in dealing with people. I don't do a lot of cons or comic shop visits, but Instagram, YouTube, and I'm here with you tonight, hopefully talk some Golden Age. So that's sort of where I've come from. I feel I'm humble that you think I'm one of the great minds in comics, because I really don't feel that way. I feel like I'm an amateur and I'm still learning, but I learn quickly and I am obsessively researching and keeping on top of stuff. So I do the best I can. I've been pretty successful getting some decent stuff in my collection, and yeah, it's just been a lot of fun, and it's a continuing challenge.
Tell me about PCH Market Watch.
Okay, PCH Market Watch. I started a separate Instagram for that, which, in all fairness, I have not kept up with for months. But I started it as a way to sort of have, it's kind of like an impromptu overstreet price guide for Golden Age non-superhero stuff, which I like to call dark GA, dark Golden Age. It's an identifiable genre that a lot of people are into and it never really had a label. I just call it dark GA. It's the stuff that's sort of non-superhero Golden Age that has sort of a noir, mystery, hard, dark theme element to it, and it's mostly cover art is what's collectible about it. You know, Bondage, PCH, some of the more violent crime covers, stuff like that. And I started PCH Market Watch to sort of just give glimpses into the market of where things are selling, what's hot, what's not. And I have a lot of other stuff going on, and I haven't had the time to keep up on it, but I haven't deleted it. So at some point I'll go back and sort of rehash it and get it up to where I think it should be. But yeah, I mean, I haven't kept up with that for a while, so it's kind of just.
We got a cult following for a minute. In fact, I mentioned to a buddy that you were going to be on the podcast, and he's like, "Oh, ask him about PCH Market Watch." Was the first thing out of his mouth, because what you were able to do was capture auction results from Comic Link, Comic Connect, Heritage, not just eBay, because you're tracking those books, and it was an incredible tool for the uninitiated. Just to be like, wow, that's what that sells for. Cool.
Yeah, I tried to give my little thoughts on it. I'll tell you why I sort of paused from that, and there's a couple reasons, and I will go back to it at some point. But number one, it takes more work than one might think, because I'm tracking Golden Age on Comic Link, Comic Connect, Heritage, and eBay. And it takes a lot of time.
How do you follow some of those auctions? You have to bid.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're on Comic Connect, you can just track items, and then you start.
Right, but only that one.
Place bids.
Yeah.
Heritage is every week on Sunday night, and then they have featured auctions too. And then eBay is a free-for-all that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's a lot of work to keep up with that, and I just haven't had the time in the last few months with everything else going on in my life to keep up with those 4 sites at a level that I think what I was trying to do demands. I don't feel I'd be doing it justice or doing it fairly without having the time that I had initially to devote to following all that stuff. And there was another thing also, and I can get around that by just sort of deleting a little more of my input or toning it down. But there will be a lot of books. The Golden Age market collectors, it can be a small neighborhood sometimes. And I would be posting a lot of books, and I would get a DM from somebody I know saying, "Hey, that's my book. Why are you bashing it?" Or, "Do you think that was too high of a price?" And then there's sort of I don't know that people were getting pissed off at me about it, but it became a little bit too personal of a connection with what I was posting, and I wasn't trying to do that. I was trying to make it separate from myself, and that would just take some time to sort of work out the kinks of how I want to do that. But there's a lot of
I get that. Yeah, I get that. The personal stuff, it's like what I don't even know how to respond to some of the things that you hear from people, and God bless them. They're just books, they're just numbers, they're just opinions, and they're yours. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having them. But yeah, I was a big fan. I still am a big fan, and I hope that you continue that process. It was an incredible resource, and I think more live auction results. They're just a win. GPA doesn't report all of these things, and you were able to provide some real insights. One of the things I learned early when I got into the Golden Age market was that the worst thing I can possibly do is post a want to buy ad on the CGC boards, because all I do is drive prices through the roof.
Yeah. Well, the CGC boards, all right, so I'm on the CGC boards, and I sort of lurk. I'll check stuff out, but I'm not active on there, hardly ever. Occasionally, I have a big book that I want to sell that I know will be appreciated by a specific core of collectors. I'll put on there. But I don't use the CGC boards to buy and sell very often, but I'll read stuff on there, and I'll keep an eye on it from time to time. But I didn't include that in PCH Market Watch because I feel like sellers and buyers on there, it's sort of a little more of a club atmosphere. They don't want that stuff. It's not that it's a big secret, but it's not for public consumption. And, you know, that's why if you're selling a book on the board, you're allowed to sell it elsewhere. You have to only sell it. To keep that sort of an exclusive way to keep it as a very honorable, ethical place to buy and sell and trade books. And it works phenomenally for that. They do a great job with that. But that's why I don't include it in the PCH Market Watch when I was doing it. But I also don't, just personally, I can't deal with the format. It's too 90s message board style for me.
It is, in fact, a 90s message board.
So I know I'm missing out on a lot, but it's just, it's not for me. I can't deal with the format, and I can't, it's just something I personally can't deal with. But it's a great.
Do you track books there?
Not really. I mean, there are some people who sell on there that also sell on eBay that are also known on Instagram. So I sort of keep my eye on it a little bit, but I'm not fully engaged on the boards. But I mean, I see what stuff goes for on the boards. People will send me a link to stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think the prices that stuff goes for on the boards are, you know, similar to what you'll see on some of the collectors on Instagram will offer stuff up for, buy it for. And a lot of these books, there's not a lot of copies out there. So if one's bought or sold on the boards, it's likely to show up where it came from, one of the 3 auction houses, where it'll be on Instagram. So stuff that happens on some of these Golden Age books, the word gets around even if you're not following one specific forum, because there's not a lot of them out there.
Yeah, and that's something I think is really interesting. I mean, I see a lot of the same books getting recycled in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
From one marketplace to the next, and the prices just jumping. It's pretty phenomenal. So how did you get into podcasting? How did that happen?
On YouTube, you mean?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah. I guess I was starting to really have a really involved, mature passion for comics, and I didn't have anyone else to really share it with on a daily basis. And I was sort of starving for, you know, a connection or friends that were into that, because most of us don't have a ton of real life friends that are there day to day that are into this stuff. They just think
nope,
we're spending money to do on this stuff or whatever. So
I swear to God, the people that I work with, they are about this close to asking me like, so what sort of Halloween costume are you wearing to your comic book show this weekend? Right. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. So I started looking basically on YouTube for content at first to just learn and see what else is out there. And I noticed very quickly that it was a community of people that were interacting with each other. It was like a little club. And so I threw my hat in the ring and just didn't expect it to go anywhere. I wasn't really sure, but I knew that these were similar, like-minded people to myself. So I just sort of jumped in, and it's a very welcoming community, and it's awkward at first to start making videos because you feel like you're talking to yourself, and it's always weird to hear yourself when you replay a video or something, but
it makes me physically nauseous.
Yeah, I'm over it now, but it used to.
Are you?
I think everybody feels like that at first, though. Yeah.
All right.
But well, you know, people who you like their videos or their content or their books or their thoughts or whatever will comment on yours, and you realize that you're starting to be part of the community because people are watching your content, people are corresponding with you, and then you make actual friendships. And yeah, it's a really welcoming community, and it's, you know, whenever I have something I'm passionate about on a particular day in the hobby, I can always go to somebody that I know on YouTube that's in the community that I'm now friends with and share it with them. Whereas people in my real life around me may not, you know, they're not going to have any idea of what I'm talking about. So that's sort of how I got into it. And, you know, you can get as involved as you want on YouTube. There's so much content. It's such a large community, and there's so many different types of collectors out there that whatever type of collector you are, whatever type of books you're into, whatever your style is, you can find similar like-minded people in the YouTube community that do that. So it's a very welcoming community, and it's very comfortable once you get in it.
All right. So before people get angry, let's start talking books. You were kind enough to send me some photos of some really amazing amazing books, and I want to kind of rock and roll through a lot of these. This is one that I love for 1,000 different reasons, and it sells a hell of a lot higher than GPA. And if you got it in your hand,
I got it right here.
oh my gosh, holy cow! Will you tell people about that book who are unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, so this is Beware Terror Tales number 8. It's the last issue in the title. Fawcett Publications from 1953. The bulk of this title, only had 8 issues. A lot of these pre-code horror titles don't have a lot of issues. And so it's not unusual to have an entire title, an entire run of only 8 issues. This one has 8 issues. They're all decent, but this one is far and away, to me, and I think most PCH collectors would agree, the best in the title. And it's a very unusual color scheme. It's not bright. There's a lot of muted grays and pewters and greens and like dark red. And it's just a gruesome witchcraft scene here, and a pretty tough, above average, hard to find book in pre-code horror.
Now, let's talk about that. The way you describe that, you would think that there were thousands and thousands of copies. They're hard to find. It's above average. The reality is the census on that book is what, approximately?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we can look it up. But I will bet you that there's probably 20 or less.
Yeah, I was gonna say if there's more than 25, I'll be shocked.
Yeah, I'll look it up while we talk. But all of the books in the Golden Age are much tougher to find than Bronze Age books, for instance. But even among Golden Age, some stuff is harder to find than others. And for me, and this is just the way I do it, the census doesn't tell you how many copies are in existence. But if it's a good book that's sought after that people like, they'll send it in to get graded. So you can get an idea of what's out there based on how many are on the census. So for me, if a book has 20 or less on the census, I feel like that shows that is above average in the rarity for Golden Age books. And what becomes, quote, common in Golden Age books would be over 100. If you look at an Action Comics,
yeah, but there's
over 100.
For the record, there's idiots like me that keep these things and don't send them back in.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah, CGC would like to have people send those old ones back in so they can adjust the census. But
yeah, they'll give you 50 cents.
Yeah, it can have a bigger percentage effect on something like a Beware Terror Tales 8, but there's not a lot of
crack press reslab
cracking and pressing of Beware Terror Tales 8. I mean, if you find one at this point, and PCH wasn't really that popular, 10, 15 years ago, so you're not going to find a lot of old style CGC slabs on a lot of the PCH. You're not getting a lot of cracks and resubs with those. So the census numbers are more accurate than they would be for something like Hulk 181, which who knows how many of those are resubs. Probably up to 30, 40% of them probably.
What do you think total? I mean, it's hard for me to ever guesstimate. I'm always sort of like, I take a census and multiply it by 3 and figure that's how many are sitting in people's show boxes. But I don't know if that's just something I envisioned in my head is giving me like some idea of how many of those books may be in circulation.
I usually multiply by 5, and then I'll adjust up or down depending on how hot the book is. Because if you find a book that nobody wants and there's only 2 on the census, it's because nobody wants it. It's not sought after. Nobody's sending it in. But a book that's highly coveted, every time somebody finds one these days, they're sending it in. Now, some are still out there raw, so you got to multiply. I usually multiply by 5, and I feel like it's give or take depending on how hot the book is. Beware Terror Tales 8 at this point is a hot PCH book. People are going to pass it up. It demands a bit of a premium, and there's 17 on the census. So I consider that, even compared to other Golden Age books, to be rare. This is under 20.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of maybe I don't know. It's certainly one of my favorite covers ever. It's unquestionably one of the greatest PCH covers ever. I love it. It's a beautiful book. I am jealous.
And I'll tell you, what's amazing about this book is, I've got a 4.0 with off-white pages. from 1953. This is wheelhouse grade for me. This is a rock solid, presentable, complete, attached, nice copy with good paper quality. Really, really solid copy here. But even on the census, you know, there's 17 of them. Only 2 are lower graded than mine. Mine's one of the lowest graded copies, which is sort of amazing when you see something like that for this book, that there's a 9.2, a 9.0, an 8.5, an 8.0, a 7.5, a 7.0, 2 6.0s, 3 5.5s, 2 4.5s, and then my copy. So that's kind of insane. There's so many high grade copies of this out there. But those are locked away in collections where most people aren't going to part with them, and you'll see 1 or 2 a year maybe pop up. So it's a pretty tough book to get, and it's, again, you know, there's not a lot of bright eye-popping colors. It's just a very unique and just awesome cover. So yeah, I absolutely love this book.
Wow. Now, when we met, I had one of these suckers at my at the booth I was at, not my book. That was in Baltimore. It's often referred to as the Bender book.
Yep.
Can you tell those who are unfamiliar with Startling 49 about the book?
All right, so Startling 49, Alex Schomburg, if you know anything about Golden Age, you know Alex Schomburg is one of the most coveted, well-respected artists at this point from the Golden Age. Probably most well-known for his Marvel Mystery Comics, Captain America, Human Torch, Timely stuff from the 40s. But he did a lot of other stuff. This is a book from 1948. And he went through a period of time where he was doing a lot of airbrushed works of art, and they were appearing on titles by this company, Nidor and Better Publications. Exciting Comics, Startling Comics, Thrilling Comics. He did a lot of airbrush covers. So this has a distinctive style. It's an airbrush cover. And you know, what I've learned about this over the last several years that I've been in Golden Age comics is that collectors either absolutely love this book or they don't get it. There doesn't seem to be any in between. This is either one of the ultimate greatest Golden Age works of art, sci-fi especially, or Golden Age collectors are like, man, it doesn't do it for me. And it's weird. There's no middle ground on this book. It's either massive or it's no big deal, which is kind of strange. But to me, it's massive.
Oh, it's massive.
Sci-fi goes, this is one of the best Golden Age sci-fi books. It's just elegant in its simplicity and its layout. Yeah, I mean, the colors, I mean, there's not a lot to it. It's just, you know, elegant and simple and just super cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, and clearly was the inspiration for the Futurama character Bender.
Yeah, I mean, I show this off to people who are not into Golden Age comics, and they say, "Oh, that looks just like Bender." Yeah, that's what we all say, the Bender book. So this is Bender. And he did a lot of robot covers with similar robots, but this one most closely resembles Bender.
Yeah, well, you've got the Brick Bradford too.
Yeah, I've got a Brick Bradford 6. And I just showed it to you before I went on the air, and now I'm trying to find it again.
That's how I know that.
Yeah, so it's easy. I have less than 100 books on my PC. So this is another Schomburg robot cover, similar style, but not quite the Bender that the other one is.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
This one is, they're both, I would say neither one of these is really that hard to find. But the demand for these is much higher than some other books. So while there's a higher supply, there's also a much higher demand. So these books, they go quick when they are for sale. They sell pretty quick.
Yeah, the one that was at the booth I was at in Baltimore lasted less than a half of one day of the show.
Yeah, I remember seeing that on the first day. And then on the second day, I didn't see it because I went back over there. And I think I knew who bought it. And yeah, I mean, if you have something like that at a con, you know, there was you know who I got this from. He had, I don't know, he must have had like double-digit copies of this that he had saved up over the years.
Wow.
And you know, he sells 1 or 2 every time he's at a show, and I think he's down to only a couple copies. So they move, and for Golden Age stuff, that's moving quick. Whew. It's not a Hulk 181 flying off the shelves type book, but they go quick. You know what I mean? So I'm happy to grab this copy.
Oh,
And I like Schomburg robots. It's sort of like, I don't collect really runs of anything, but I collect little sets, and I really like Schomburg robot covers, and I've got a few of those, and there's a couple more I need. I don't have a Human Torch number 23 yet, similar looking robot, but I've got a couple others that I picked up. If you want to see, I got another one I just got recently.
Yeah, hell yeah. I love the rarities. I mean,
So here is Exciting Comics 45, and this one is one of the tougher ones to find. I think this one there's 20 or 21 on the census. So this one falls into.
That's in great shape.
More hard to find. It's got a little bit of fading because the title and these machines in the background are supposed to be red, so it's a little faded. But otherwise, this is a VG range copy. Nice complete attached copy, good paper quality. Yeah, this is a really cool Black Terror cover here with the robot.
Super neat.
So yeah, that's another Schomburg robot cover I picked up. This one decidedly harder to find than the Brick Bradford or the Startling, but not quite as expensive. But just as cool as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And got another one I picked up last year. And this one, I think there's even fewer on the census, maybe 15 or 16 or something. It's Mystery Comics 3. Robot with a Tommy gun. And I do have one of the better copies of this. I got a 5.0, so this is.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So, and this one really bright, vibrant colors on this one. So this is a nice copy of this book. Under 20 on the census for this. Yeah, nice one. Alex Schomburg again.
I've never seen one in real life. Yeah, I mean, wow. Super cool.
Yeah, so, I've got 4 solid Schomburg robot covers, and, I'm working on getting some more. And, a Human Torch 23 is probably next on my list. And then I think there's another one I don't even remember off the top of my head, but there's not a ton of them. So I'm working on that. It's a fun run. It's challenging to find them, too.
Tell me about this book. I know it's one you looked for a long, long time.
That is my favorite pre-code horror book of all time. Horrific number 1. And, this is the icon I use on Instagram. This is the icon I use on YouTube. It's just my favorite pre-code horror book. First issue of the title. This title is famous for having almost all of the issues having a floating head in the middle, drawn by Don Heck. The first couple issues are slightly different, but after issue number 3, they go into those central head figures on the cover. It's one after another through the rest of the run. Those don't do it as much for me, but something about this with the orchestra and the conductor and the colors and the woman dancing in the middle, it's artfully done, and it's charming and horrific at the same time. And even the title with the orange and the purple laid against that green background, it's really stunning when you get a good copy like this. And this is a book that I wanted. It's my favorite PCH book. It's really hard to find. It took me years before I found a copy, and what I first got was a raw copy I bought, which I got it graded, and it was a low grade. I got a 1.8 slightly brittle pages from CGC on that one. I wanted a better copy because I so treasure this book, and I got lucky and scored this actually off of eBay last year to replace that 1.8. It's a 3.5 off-white to white, which is good enough for me. It's a solid copy. But yeah, this is just my favorite PCH book.
Yeah, I knew it was near and dear to your heart. It's gorgeous. Whew.
It's some PCH books are just in your face horrific. This one's not like that. This has a certain charm to it mixed in, namely brought about by the female figure dancing in the front, that gives it a little something extra that you don't see often on PCH books. And it still has the horror element, and with the flames, and even the musical notes in the background. I mean, this is a true work of art, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Really nice.
Wow. Lovely. All right. What is this guy?
All right, All New Comics 8. Let me pull out my actual copy of that. All right, so if you're into dark GA or GA at all, the top in, I talk about the dark GA category. I call it dark GA. This is technically a superhero book, but it transcends that sort of. But this is sort of known as the poor man's Suspense 3. Now, Suspense Comics 3 is the top in the dark GA genre. It's an Alex Schomburg book. It's got a crazy sacrificial scene on it with hooded Nazi cult about to sacrifice this girl, and it has a guy coming down with a knife to sacrifice her. It's just a killer scene. It's the consensus #1 dark GA book is Suspense Comics 3. This is sort of considered the poor man's Suspense 3. Sort of a similar layout, also by Alex Schomburg, and this is it's a hot book. If you're into this category in Golden Age, this is a book that's on everyone's list. And there's not enough on the census or in circulation to go around. So I'm really glad that I scored a copy of this.
Added to the list of books I've never seen in person. Not once, never.
This is the first one I've ever seen in person, and when I got it and opened it up, and it was the first time I've ever gazed upon it. It's already enslabbed, and that's fine. I like it. And This is the first copy I've ever seen in person for me. So, and it's not something I expected to find. I sort of stumbled on this. I mean, it's on my radar, but it's not something I thought I would get anytime soon. But I happened to have the budget. I happened to be looking around. I didn't have a specific target in mind, and then this came around at the right time, and I just had good timing, and I sort of got lucky to score this because I know it wouldn't have lasted much longer. And I've already gotten several offers on it.
I bet.
Well above what I paid for this, but I'm not prepared to part with it yet. It's too cool. There's so much going on there. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much going on in every corner of this book.
Yeah, so while you're showing that, can you talk a little bit about how you shop for books, how you learn about Golden Age books, and what your process is? I know that's personal for everybody and different for everyone, but you indicated, I guess, for example, that it wasn't like you were targeting this book exclusively. It was on your radar, but it wasn't as if you were, sending out balloons looking for it. Instead, the opportunity presented itself, and you were ready to seize the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I do now, and it evolves over time, but where I'm at now, I'll talk about is I'm trying to only pick up books that are big books, and I mean big books to me. I'm not basing whether it's a big book by how expensive it is, although a lot of them are higher value books. But I'm trying to put together a small, concise collection of what I consider big books for me. So what I do is I put together a budget, and I get prepared to make a purchase and go after a big book. And what I don't do anymore is make a specific want list, because that's one thing if you're collecting bronze or silver, and if you want an ASM1 and a 4.0, you can go when you're ready and find an ASM1 and a 4.0 and negotiate the price on it and add that and move down to the next book on your list. It doesn't work like that in Golden Age. I can make a want list.
Hold on. Why doesn't it work like that in Golden Age? Explain that for those who are not aware.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make want lists, and then stuff on my want list never shows up for a whole year.
Dang.
You know what I mean? Or it'll show up in a grade. I mean, yeah, I might want, Underworld Crime 7 is on my list, and you'll see a couple copies a year, but I'm not looking for a 7.5. I don't want a 2.0 either, so maybe a 7.5 and a 2.0, the only ones that pop up for the whole year. I can't put blinders on. I've got to be open to other opportunities and other possibilities. So what I do is I try to take advantage of a big book that is high on my sort of nebulous list that I can get at a decent price. And, I'm guilty of overpaying for things at times too, because you want something and there it is, that's the time to get it. But I don't make want lists anymore. I'm ready. I know when I'm ready to get something, when I'm ready to pull the trigger. And then I will search, and I will be patient, and I will pull the trigger at the right time. And when you've been doing this, even as long as I have, which, honestly is not that long, you know when you get that feeling that it's right to pull the trigger. There's no hesitation. You know that's the right time, and you don't hesitate, and then you go after it. And that's what happened with this book. But there's, this book is on my list, but I didn't have expectations of getting it. But had I been sticking to a want list, I might not even have seen this. I might have passed on it. I might have hesitated, and somebody else grabbed it. And because I'm looking for something, I'm stuck to my list. So I don't make lists anymore.
Did you buy that on eBay?
I saw it on eBay and I bought it. I contacted the dealer directly who had it and bought it directly from the dealer. That's a good thing about eBay.
I saw it on eBay, and by the time I figured out whether or not it was the right price, gone.
Yeah, I didn't hesitate because
congratulations.
That's another thing. Sometimes you have to look. You can lose out on deals if you pull the trigger too quick. You will buy books that you lose a little money on, or you regret buying, or you paid a little too much for. But you will also get gems like this that I consider a home run. Absolutely. And the home runs far outweigh the minor losses and regrets, and because you can always resell something even if you lose a little bit. But when you pull the trigger quick without hesitation and you don't dilly-dally on it, you can score home runs like this too. So yeah, I saw this. I didn't research the price. I knew it's got to be a ballpark price, and it seems, it's ballpark enough that let me get it. And even if I decide down the road I want to move it, I definitely am not going to get hurt on it. But it's such a killer book. That's the time to get it. So I didn't hesitate. So yeah, I got lucky because I happened to see it right when it got listed.
Strong, my friend. Very strong.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. What's this gorgeous beauty right here?
This is another one I didn't hesitate on, and I'll tell you, I bought this book. So this is Terrific Comics 5, another Alex Schomburg. I'm weird. I like Alex Schomburg as long as it's not a timely World War II book, essentially. So, I mean, I'm kind of an odd Schomburg collector because if it's a timely World War II, I don't want it. So that's kind of odd for Schomburg collectors because that's the most coveted stuff. But this is one of his more sought after works, I would say. Terrific Comics 5. I don't know how many are on the census, but there's far fewer that actually come to market than there are out there. A lot of people hold these. This is a book that ends up a lot of times in black hole collections, which would, that's the type of collection where stuff enters and never leaves. A lot of these are in those collections. I found this at a con from a major dealer who had it on the lower rack by the desk, sort of out of sight unless you craned your neck over to look, and I did.
Wow.
I didn't want to miss anything. So I look in under every corner. I lift every stone. I leave no stone unturned, so to speak. So I saw it down there in the corner. I was like, let me take a look at that. And luckily at this con, I had a Hulk 181 with me in like an 8.5 grade at the peak of its value 2 years ago. And so I was able to sell that at the con to one dealer and walk across the aisle to this dealer and buy this book. So basically traded a Hulk 181 for this, more or less. And yeah, again, I didn't hesitate. And when I went back to get it, I'm looking at it just to make sure that I'm going to do the deal. And there was another guy next to me that's like, can I take a look at that? And I was like, well, hold on, I think I'm going to buy this. And I think he was a little upset that he had just missed it by minutes, maybe. But yeah, as soon as I was able to, I went back and scored this. And
would you zoom in on that so they can really see it? I mean, it's one of Schomburg's finest.
Yeah, and there's something in the hobby about yellow covers too. So notwithstanding that it's just phenomenal as it is, with all the yellow in the background and the red, and just that title swooping in too. Girl being lowered onto the spinning wheel of spikes. There's a bald villain with a Tommy gun. This hooded cult leader in the chair. The guy pulling the lever on the bottom. It's phenomenal, man. I really love it. This was a book, again, that was high on my list that I was aware of, but didn't think, I'm like, a few years down the road, maybe I'll be able to score one of these. And I sort of stumbled upon it, and I just happened to have big books with me at the con that I brought for that specific purpose. And this is what I left with. And I think this is the only book I bought that whole con.
That's a hell of a con. Well done.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm very proud of this one. And would I like to upgrade at some point? I mean, you know, who the hell am I that I need to upgrade this? You know what I mean? A complete unrestored attached copy that looks great is good enough.
Yeah.
I mean, any copy of this that you can find is quality. So
add it to the list of books I've never seen in person. God.
That's the only one I've seen.
Right.
I've seen a few since then come up for auction, but
now here's one that isn't as rare, right?
Well, I think this one is more rare than all the ones we've looked at so far.
Really? I didn't know that.
This is a book I found just researching images on my comic shop, I think. So I
did not know that.
Yeah, I was aware that this book was out there, but I had never seen one.
It's relatively inexpensive compared to the other ones, isn't it?
It's pretty cheap. Yeah, it's pretty cheap, but I mean, it's super cool.
I mean, it's a super cool book.
Yeah, let me show you something.
Super cool.
I found one on eBay on a late night auction, a lower grade copy, and I added it to my watch list and placed a bid. And when it came up in the middle of the night, I was the only bidder at a low bid, and so I got it cheap.
You stole it? Well done.
Yeah, and that one ended up being, that's not this copy, but that one ended up being a 2.5. And it was the only copy.
What started it?
What's that?
That's what started it?
That's what started it. I got a 2.5, and I've got a picture here. Then after the 2.5, I bought a 5.0 that came up. Just, I think it was on eBay. I'm not sure, but I just straight out bought it. I waited a little bit, but I bought. I'm like, I can upgrade. I'll sell the 2.5 and keep the 5.0. And then I found a dealer who had. It was a dealer on eBay, but I contacted him about some other stuff. But he had this, and I bought this raw copy, this 7.5 raw copy. So what I ended up with at one point was these 3 copies of this book.
Oh my goodness!
And there were only maybe 5 or 6 copies total on the census.
No way.
And there have since added a few more. Somebody got a 9.0 graded, and I think there's somebody on Instagram who has an 8.0. And so I sent this one in. I got a 7.5 off-white pages. And yeah, it's not super expensive, but I think there's maybe 8 or 9 on the census. It's not a book.
I had no idea that I had no idea the census was so small. I knew that you were hoarding copies of that book. You're who turned me on to it, and I was like, oh, that's super cool. And I didn't think it could be any cooler.
Yeah, it's just you know, I couldn't sell this if I wanted to, because nobody's going to give me what I think it's worth. But it's a high grade copy. It's from 1947. I think it's a Reed Crandall cover, although CGC doesn't have any notes on it. But I think it's a Reed Crandall cover, and it's just a classic Universal Monster style. Well, maybe not Universal Monster, but a classic, more like the Howling, I guess. Classic werewolf cover, and the shadows on the wall, and it's just it's got a real cool feel to it, and it's just a cool horror book. And this title is not really known for horror covers. This is my favorite one in the title, and it's a book you will rarely ever see, honestly, and it's really not that expensive when it comes up. So if you see one come up, you can probably get it for a decent price. The problem is seeing one come up. Now, I've had 3 copies. I got lucky on it. I don't think there's that many copies of this out there. And those 3 are the only 3 I've ever seen, are the 3 that I bought. So
wow.
But yeah, that's a keeper in a 7.5 from 1947.
Yeah, I didn't think the book could be any cooler until you told me how rare it was. Holy crap.
Yeah, and you know, maybe somebody's sitting on 25 copies of it, but it's not something I ever see for sale other than the 3 I bought. Those are the only 3 I've ever seen. And I don't know too many other collectors who even own a copy or have seen a copy. And there's not many on the census. So that leads me to believe this is not a common book out there.
That's very cool.
And again, that's a big book for me, but I don't think it's really worth all that much. But for me, that's a big book. It's a super cool, rare book, and it's a high grade. So that's a big book for me. But it's just probably not worth that much.
What's this guy?
Suspense Comics 8 is an LB Cole cover. And let me find my copy here.
Was 2019 the year of LB Cole?
Yeah, I mean, I think so far 2019 was the year of LB Cole. Yeah, late 2018, and then most of 2019 is the year of LB Cole. His stuff just got red hot in 2018 and continued into last year. It's cooled off since, but some of his bigger works are not cooled off. This is one that's probably not cooled off. This is one of his bigger works. It's Suspense Comics 8 from 1945. This is an upgrade from a copy that I bought years ago that was a 3.0. So I bought this 4.0. Yeah, so this is, number 3 in this title is the, uber big top of the list Suspense 3 Schomburg cover. That's top of the list. But most of the other covers are LB Cole covers. There's a couple that aren't, but the bulk of the run after issue, 4, essentially 4 and on, is LB Cole work. And this is the best one. And he did sort of an homage to this cover of his in 1952 on Startling Terror Tales 11, which is, Wheelhouse PCH book. This is 1945, 7 years earlier. Same spider, same 2 people getting mauled by this spider with a skull. And I think that's Mr. Nobody is his name in the back. So yeah, this is a classic LB Cole book. And I think there's not quite a few. There's ample number of them out there, but again, there's a lot of these books are in collections being held tightly, and it'll come up. It's not like if you want this book, you can be patient. You'll find a copy. Be prepared to pay up for it because it's not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you'll need what, 5K, 3,500.
Yeah, I mean,
depends on the mood of the seller and the grade, but like.
I don't like to talk too much about prices, but
it's an expensive book.
And here's the thing sometimes with books like this, or some of this offbeat dark GA, even dealers who are familiar with everything, they don't specialize specifically in this stuff. It's hard to price. You can't go on GPA and see what the last 4.0 sold for last month. It's not on there.
Right.
I mean, this particular one might be because it's the one I bought, but you kind of have to wing it. You have to have a feel for it and price it. And a lot of times you get books undervalued from a major dealer because they don't know how to price it. And they're trying to focus on, bronze, silver, gold, superhero, everything. You can't keep up on everything perfectly. And some of the stuff that's hard to price, you can get deals on when they come up.
Yeah, I've missed Power Comics number 3, which is one of my favorite LB Cole covers, not once, but twice. Once just because I was too big of a chicken shit to pull the trigger at a show where I was getting creamed. And the second time because I was driving and too lazy to pull over and make the purchase. My buddy sent me the text message and I'm like, oh, it'll be there by the time I get home. It was not in fact there by the time I got home.
Yeah, there's another book I have here that reminds me of Power Comics just because of the black cover. But yeah, Power Comics is on my list, and I've seen a few copies, and like you, I hesitated and passed on them.
Gone.
Being gone. They don't stick around. This is another LB Cole black cover that I like.
Oh, wow.
Similar to Power 3. It's Target, it's volume 9, number 12. This is another one you don't see a lot of, and they don't hang around. I saw this on an Instagram photo of a rack that a dealer had at a con. He just posted like, hey, come check me out at booth whatever. And he posted a picture of his setup. And I zoomed in because I know he has good stuff. And I saw this on the rack raw. And I sent him an Instagram message. And it's a dealer that I talk to on a regular basis. And he got back to me pretty quick. And he's like, I have that at this price as a, what he said, 3.5 at this price. And I was like, all right, let me get that. He's like, it'll be a while before I get back. I'm like, all right, pull it down off your wall. And I'm paying you now. Whenever you get back in town or whatever, ship it to me. I'm not worried about when I get it, but I just want to lock it down. So I paid him for it, and this is the book I got. Accurate grade and just a killer black cover. A tough book to find, and an LB Cole. Sort of reminds me of a Mask 1, which I actually have a copy here if you want to compare the two.
Absolutely.
All right. All right, so here's the Target Comics, which I think is sort of like a poor man's Mask 1. And then here is the actual L.B. Cole work.
Wow.
Now, this is not my book, but I have it in my possession right now, so I'll just show it off. But you can see the similarities. They're both L.B. Cole covers. The Mask is a huge Golden Age Grail level book, whereas the Target's not. They're both super cool L.B. Cole covers.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the price tag on Mask 1 this year? Holy crap. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a sort of a big book. And then L.B. Cole got hot, and
it's like somebody poured gasoline on a fire. I've just been amazed.
I would say this is the #1 L.B. Cole book. Of all L.B. Cole works, this is top of the list. Some people like Mask 2 better, but I think most people would agree that this is the consensus #1 L.B. Cole work right here, Mask 1. So L.B. Cole stuff got hot. Obviously, this is at the top of the list. And it's not a book that you saw very often. And I think it was because the people who owned these appreciated it more themselves than the amount of money they thought they could get on the market. But as prices rise, that brings books out of the woodwork. So you'd see some of these showing up on the market towards the end of 18, a couple in 19, and then at the end of 19, you saw a few more. And the feeding frenzy just happened on this book. When they were coming up, there was a few that came up in the last 4 or 5 months, and they have been on auction on like Comic Link, Comic Connect especially. And they have been absolute feeding frenzies when this book has come up. And it's just shot through the roof. But there's not a lot of historical price data on this book until recently. So people are just winging it, and they want a copy. And the last 5.5 sold in the last 60 to 90 days. I can't remember exactly when it was. Recently, though, 5.5 sold for $24,000. So yeah, I mean, it's a book that a lot of people think is headed to Suspense 3 territory as one of the top dark GA books, right up there with Suspense 3 and maybe Fantastic Comics 3, up in the upper echelon, and they're willing to pay for it, and they have been recently. So yeah, that's brought more copies to market of Mask 1 and Mask 2. But the demand is far outpacing the supply of these on the market, so the price remains high. So yeah, that's the deal on this. And yeah, I agree. This is a fantastic work of art. So I mean, I'm in line with that. I love L.B. Cole, and this is a book that I would love to own someday. And like I said, this is not my copy, but I have
it. I mean, gorgeous. We've got a buddy who one of his biggest. I think I don't want to call it regrets. That's just not the nice enough, or that's not a nasty enough word. But like one of the biggest like comic traumas he suffered was cashing in a pair of Mask 1 and Mask 2 for next to nothing to a local dealer back in the day, before he knew better. And they are books that you just do not see. You don't see it all.
Yeah, and I knew Mask 1 and Mask 2. I mean, if you're into dark GA, you know those books are top of the list. You know they're hot books. But without price data and just going compared to some other stuff out on the market, you think you know where to price it. And some early on in the madness for this book over the last year, there were a couple that I particularly went after that were posted or listed for sale and sold instantly, so fast that I even sent a claim email to a seller as soon as it was listed, within 30 seconds. And I think I missed out by 25 people ahead of me. That's how fast it sold. And he put it at a price that he thought was, legit fair market value price for that book. And it wasn't cheap. It was a Mask 2. I think it was a 4.0 Mask 2.
Wow.
And it was a high price for,
Blue Label.
Change. Blue Label.
Right. Blue Label.
Mask 2. And it sold instantly. And I think it's made the rounds. It's sold a few times since then for an increased price each time. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. it's tough to gauge where the market on those books goes. It's not like you just sort of have to wing it a little bit and get a feel for if the market in particular areas is hot or if it's softening or if there's some slack there. I think it's softening a little on these, but when you have a 5.5 sell for 24 grand, there's nowhere to go but down for a minute. It can't just continue skyrocketing at that pace. So there's a brief pause where people catch their breath, and then these books probably will both continue on as upper echelon dark GA books.
Very cool stuff. Talk to me about this guy. It's one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, one of my personal favorites for pre-code horror books, Weird Mysteries 5, and a book that's been on my list for quite a while. And 4 and 5 in this title are the two I really wanted. I picked up a 4 a while ago. I've had that, and I've been looking for a 5 ever since. This one I scored at a con. Again, I brought books with me, which I sold around, and then I negotiated a deal on this. And not the hardest book in the world to find, but one of the most gruesome horror covers from the era. Bernard Bailey art, pretty well-known, top-of-the-line artist. He did a lot of work for DC Superman, too, like Action Comics, I think he did some work on, too. And a variety of, a wide array of pre-code horror stuff. This is a Gilmore publication, and they top out on the census at, like, I think 8.0. For a while, I think 7.5 was the highest graded copy, and now I think there's an 8.0 out there somewhere. So when you see something like this in a 5.0, that's a really high grade for this book.
Hell yeah.
And a lot of books I have like this, it's not like I'm trying to get a particular grade, because my Weird Mysteries 4 is a 2.5. I just get what meets my criteria, which is an unrestored, complete, presentable, good copy. And then if it's a 2.5 and that works, I'll get that. And then this one happened to be a 5.0 and I got it. So I'm pretty happy with this one. And it's, you know, one of, it's a top 10 PCH, I would say, on everyone's list.
Super cool. So when it comes to PCH books or Golden Age books generally, do you price books like by the point? Is that kind of how you value them? Like, oh, that's this much a point-ish generally?
I do. I know a lot of people in Golden Age, in the Golden Age hobby, don't like that per point pricing system, but there's.
I do it too.
Yeah, it applies for the meat of the book, like the medium, the middle of the, like for that Weird Mysteries 5. I would exclude the really low grades, because on these books, when you get to a certain point of price going down, it reaches a floor where it doesn't go much below that, no matter how much worse the book is.
The entry level copy.
2.0, and it's going to be almost the same price. So it reaches a diminishing return floor there.
Yeah, the entry level copy, right?
Right, and people are willing to pay for an entry level copy a certain amount, and it's either a 1 or a 1.8 or 2.0. It doesn't necessarily matter. But as you get above those entry level sort of grades, then you get into the meat of the condition of what's out there. And for like a Weird Mysteries 5, it's probably from like, you know, it's pretty small because it tops out at 8, probably like 3 to 6, I would say, is pretty accurate price per point. And then when you get into the higher grades, there's a premium that people will pay where the price jumps exponentially for the higher grade copies. But for the meat of the census, so to speak, I think price per point is a pretty accurate way to gauge the value of a lot of these books. And you can say something is $1,000 a point. Now a 3.0 would be about $3 grand, a 5.0 would be about $5 grand. And as you start getting above that, it creeps up a little higher. You might get a 6.0 for $7 grand, and then when you get into like an 8.5, might be 12 grand or 15 grand, depending on the book. So,
but it's an easier way for me, and I guess thankfully you, I at least have somebody who does it the same way, to kind of conceptualize these books that don't come to market that often. The other way I do it is like with multipliers of Overstreet. Like, oh, it sold at this grade for 3 or 4 times, you know, what the Overstreet value is. So Overstreet valued it at this back in the day, 3 or 4. Those two indicators are kind of the way that I see the like Golden Age books and how.
Yeah, and it works good if you group similar books into like a grouping of similar level books. that you think are 1,000 a point. You know, if you have a book comes up with no sales data, but you think this book is comparable to this $1,000 a point group of books, and it's on a similar level, then you can guess that that's probably going to be around $1,000 a point too for like a mid-grade copy. And more often than not, it falls right in line with that. So when you don't have data, you can take the book and match it up to some comparables that do have some more recent price and apply it to that pretty accurately. So yeah, you have lower tier stuff that goes for 100 to 200 point. You've got the upper tier stuff that's going 1,500 to 2,000 a point. And then you got all the stuff in between. There's a lot of 500 a point books. And, you know, some of those come up, there's no data. Well, it's comparable to a lot of the other stuff out there that's running around 500 a point. This is a 4.0, probably $2,000 book. So it's pretty accurate, but it still takes some guesswork and, you know, some courage to go out and pull the trigger on something when you don't really know for sure, and you don't want to buy something that you're paying too much for in case you want to move it down the road. So it's you got to use your gut, and you just got to sort of keep up with it. But $100 a point works often, or yeah, the price per point works often.
Tell me about this guy.
Yeah, interestingly, this was not really a book that was on my list. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, I bought this last year. Planet Comics #1, Lou Fine cover. I like horror, obviously, as you know, and I also like sci-fi a lot when we've seen some good sci-fi books. This is very high on the list of Golden Age sci-fi books. Planet Comics 1, and Planet Comics is probably the Cadillac of Golden Age sci-fi for a title. It's Planet Comics. That's where it's at for sci-fi. And this is issue #1. And it's a Lou Fine cover, and he's a major Golden Age artist. Has a lot of excellent work, right up there with Schomburg. His stuff falls a little earlier overall than Schomburg's does. So yeah, it was a book I was wanting to get someday, but not high on my list. But I bought this in an auction where there wasn't a whole bunch of other stuff that I really wanted. And the only other thing in that auction, and this is not a regret, but I'll just point this out, was a Mask 1 in a 3.0.
Wow.
Which went for what today we would consider dirt cheap, but still pricey, if you know what I mean. But it was before these books were selling for 15 grand and 25 grand. But that Mask 1 I passed on because it had a big chip missing off the cover, and I don't like that. In hindsight, I would have bought it and just flipped it for a ton of money, but I was looking for something for myself. And so there was that, and then the other book was this. And I was like, yeah, I do want to Planet Comics 1. Maybe this is the right time for it. And yeah, I felt like the price on this was reasonable. And it wasn't until like the last couple minutes that I was sure that I was going after this because of where the price was on it. And it's a nice copy. And it's Planet Comics 1 from 1940. And this actually hit the newsstands in 1939 because this is a January 40 date. So it hit the newsstands late in 39. So this is actually a 1939 book. So yeah, really, really cool book here.
Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Love the riveted Planet Comics.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what you're talking about, this title ran, I think, 73 total issues. The first 22 issues have this riveted steel look on the title with the steel I-beams. And those are called the rivet issues. And from issue 23 on, it doesn't have that riveted look. So the rivet issues are a little more sought after, or a lot more sought after, because they're cooler looking with the rivets, and they're just earlier, so they're harder to come by. And they also have the bulk of Lou Fine work is in the very early issues too. And I think Will Eisner worked on this cover with him.
Wow.
I'm not 100% on that, but I think this is a Lou Fine and Will Eisner cover. But I could be wrong about the Will Eisner, but I don't know why. I think that. I'm not sure, though.
Super duper cool. So a couple other things I wanted to ask you, and I promise I won't keep you much longer. I know you promised me an hour, and I have sucked some extra time out of you, but I'm appreciative of that. I'm really appreciative of that. So do you pay much attention to the modern market when it comes to like new books on Wednesday or the Copper Age market. I know that you do some work in the Bronze Age, just from the stuff I've seen on your site. But are you reading any books these days? I mean, what's your sense of what's going on in comics?
Well, I have a sense of what's going on in comics, and whenever I share this, people will ask me. I'm happy to share my opinions and thoughts on it.
Yeah,
with the caveat that I am not involved in the modern comic market as far as buying, selling, or reading those comics. So take what I say with a grain of salt. But the reason that I am not in those comics is I feel like the modern comic market is very, not necessarily gimmick driven, but it reminds me of the gimmicky covers in the 90s. But in the 90s, those were new sort of fandangled gimmicky covers with the holograms and everything. What they're doing now, I think, is to a far greater degree with variant covers, especially.
Manufactured rarity?
Yeah, manufactured rarity is a good way to put it. And you'll hear a lot of people also talk about variant fatigue, which is people getting sort of tired of the manufactured rarity. The example I give a lot is, people will say this is a 1 in 50 ratio variant. So that, only out of every 50 they put out, there's only one of these. It's a rare variant. They're putting out rare ratio variants constantly. So a rare ratio variant in and of itself is a common thing. Now, any particular one is rare by itself, but when you have so many rare things flooding the market, it undermines that rarity of them. And they're purely, and I totally get that they're cover driven, because that's what my collecting in Golden Age is, cover driven. But when they're manufacturing these rare variant covers, and they're doing so many rare variant covers, then rare variant covers become common, and it undermines the integrity of the market from a collectible standpoint, I think. And you can go back and look at any number of these hot variant covers, and they lose value very quickly. They lose steam almost instantly in the grand scheme of things, and they're just pumping out new ones. It's sort of a live in the moment type of thing, and I like comics for more of a sustained collectability aspect. And I don't feel like there's a massive portion of the modern comic market is not geared towards long-term collectability. It's geared towards selling today to somebody who doesn't want to miss out on what's a rare item. So that's sort of my rambling thoughts on it. And like I said, take that with a grain of salt, because I don't buy, sell, or read new comics, but I know people who do, and they really dig the stories. So there is some good stuff out there. There's a lot of good stuff out there coming out today, but there's also a lot of stuff that's misleading that I think is definitely bad investments, and are not retaining value as collectibles going forward. And I'm in this market because I like the long-term collectability of the stuff, whether I'm keeping it or flipping it. I like that it has long-term solid collectability to it. I don't like stuff that has a fleeting nature to it. That's not what attracts me to comics.
Let me ask you this. So you're on the Comic Core channel, is that accurate?
The Golden Guys show is on the Comic Core channel, yes.
Okay. How did you guys get involved with them?
Well, I was asked to be on that show because JD, who is on other Comic Core shows, decided to start a Golden Age show on Comic Core. And he invited me to join him on that show, and I jumped at the opportunity to talk about Golden Age. So that's sort of how that came about. But Comic Core is an interesting YouTube channel. It's sort of,
what the hell? It's like, it's got everything.
Yeah, it's like a channel it's not necessarily run by one person like most YouTube channels. Like my YouTube channel is run by me, and I put out content. The Comic Core channel is sort of set up as a channel that you can sort of apply to for a show. And if there's a time slot that's not in use and you have a good idea for a show, you can go on Comic Core and have a show. And so there's any number of different shows on Comic Core. It's like a channel on your TV. And if there's people that run the channel, but each show is somebody who has an idea and brings it to the Comic Core, and they get a time slot that's open, and they have their own show. And JD started it at that time slot, Tuesday night, and wanted to do a Golden Age show, and then asked me. So I decided it would be a good idea.
Do you watch any other YouTube shows?
I watch as much as I can, and there's so much good content out there, I can never keep up with it all. But a couple of my favorite channels since I've joined the YouTube community include Reaper Tate, and he's got a number after his name, and I can't remember. But Reaper Tate, Anthony, runs a channel. He's been doing it for years, and he is one of the first channels I found that I still watch on a regular basis. That I love his content. He collects pre-code horror all the way up through bronze and copper and a full Spawn run. So I mean, he's running the gamut of eras for collecting, and he has a really mature, wise outlook on collecting, and I really like to hear his insights. Another one is ETA Nick. Most people are familiar with him. He's been on YouTube for years, and
I think he's going to be on the show here soon. We're just trying to nail down a date.
Yeah, cool. That would be awesome if you get him on. He puts out a ton of content. He's been in the hobby a long time. He's essentially a professional grader. You can learn a ton from him. He has tons of tutorial videos on any number of things, and it's a real good nuts and bolts channel that he puts out. His content is very nuts and bolts, and it really is. It's like a workshop. Like if you were to go to the University of Comics, and you were, you know, in your 4th year senior in the University of Comics, you'd be taking ETA Nick's class.
Yeah, so
stuff.
I like Nick because he and I see the economics of comics in a very similar way. There's a guy who has a YouTube channel called Economics of Comics that screams a lot.
Yeah.
He and I do not necessarily see things the same way, but ETA, Nick and I do, in fact, see things, although I do scream a lot like the ETA or the other guy. But yeah, he's sharp, dude.
I watch Economics and Comics too.
Okay.
Like his
he's very entertaining. Nick is not as entertaining as him. He doesn't have the shtick, but he does have a brilliant mind, man. He is like the John Nash of the comic market. I love it. Love listening to him talk. I can't wait to get him on here.
Yeah, what Bill does with Economics and Comics is interesting because he speaks his mind and he doesn't care what people think. And I always when somebody does that, when they speak their mind and they're honest and they don't care if you agree with them or not, but this is how they feel. And ultimately, you find a lot of people do agree with them and gravitate towards that. So
there's just not a lot of economics on his, but with ETA Nick, it is all. I feel like I'm in like a macroeconomics class.
That's exactly what it's like with Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, he's tremendous. Dude, he's talking about supply and like the difference between rarity and scarcity, and you know how demand drives numbers and what the market looks like as a whole. It's just it's strong.
Yeah, it's ETA Nick is like it's like a stock market investing class is what it's like. A lot of time. Now he does some other cool stuff that's not necessarily related to that, but he has a lot of market analytic type stuff. Yeah, not the most glamorous stuff, but I find it very exciting and very interesting.
Yeah, he's all steak, no sizzle. That's the kind of fucking meal I like.
That's accurate.
Yeah,
now, on Monday nights called the No Faces Chat.
I love that. You turned me on to that.
Yeah,
I don't do a good enough job of hearing it each and every week, though. But yeah, it's solid, man.
Yeah, I'm on there with Bub's Comics. It's on his channel, and he's somebody that I've known in this community for a very long time, become close friends with, and he collects a wide variety of things too. And he's very insightful and he's very intelligent about how he collects. And so he's real fun to interact with, and I've been friends with him for a while. And also Metarog, who is like an encyclopedia of comic knowledge from Silver Age and especially Bronze Age. But for Silver and Bronze, and especially Bronze, Metarog is like an encyclopedia of knowledge. And he knows a ton about, you know, more sort of unique niches of the hobby that like price variance, and artists and writers. He's very in tune with writers, inkers, you know, the artists, the editors. He knows a lot about the comic book history and comic book characters and storylines, and he's like an encyclopedia. So there's something for everybody out there. And you know, we could stay on another hour and list YouTube
Yeah.
that I watch.
Yeah. Well, the reality is that there's great content, and depending on what you enjoy, I mean, there's a home for everyone. You and I like a lot of the same books, right? I mean, I wore my shirt because you were going to be on. I always
very nice.
wear that. Yeah.
Stories 22. Yeah, that's a classic Johnny Craig cover there.
I mean, yeah, it's not a Trump hat. It's a fucking Crime Suspense Stories 22 hat. I wear every single podcast.
Nice.
It's my podcast hat. And yeah, we like a lot of the same books. And you know, while I certainly don't want to exclude people who collect comics in a different way, because I think there's always something I can learn from them. And while you know, like for example, the economics and comics guy, right? Like he and I do not collect books the same way, but like I watch his shit because he can clearly teach me stuff about things that I don't know about. I think that's important for me. And I'm really excited that we now have this robust community, because when you and I collected when we were little kids,
Yeah.
it wasn't possible. You know, like if you wanted to learn about, I mean, I had to like run to Walden Books to get my comic buyer's guide and just glean a little bit out of there. And then when Wizard came out, it was like, oh my God, there's actually articles. And
yeah, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of, you know, there's always new people coming into the hobby. And you know, I'm old enough now that I remember a time when the internet didn't exist. And it's so amazing how the internet has revolutionized the hobby. And I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate that. Before the internet, the only place to buy books was the comic shop or on the actual newsstand or at a comic convention, which
did you buy shit out of the back of magazines? Like I did. Like I'd fucking make a list and mail it to these people with money, like by, you know, check, and they'd send me books back. And you know, it was just wild.
My biggest regret was from that. I had an allowance when I was a kid, and I looked through in the back of a comic book, and I was picking out what I was going to buy. And I opted for a Thor issue, some random Thor issue from the early 80s. Instead of what had just come out was a TMNT 1.
Wow.
And I passed on that, but it had just come out. It wasn't a thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's just neat.
You know, and I passed on a TMNT 1 at the time in favor of an early random Thor.
I think about the money I spent on early Valiant books instead of like stockpiling Hulk 181s.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I really like
boy, I need that Solar Man of the Atom #1. Oh.
Yeah, I mean the early 90s was when that was at the end of my first part of my collecting when I was a kid. Because you know, I got into comics probably in like 1985. And my dad would bring home the newest issue of Thor that came out every month. And
my little brother collected Thor. That was his book.
Yeah, and that's what got me into comics like in 1985. And I really liked them. And then I started to, when we go to the grocery store, I would pick out something and my parents would let me buy, you know, these 2 comics. And I would grab 2 off of the rack at the grocery store. And then when I was able to start driving, I think I started going to the local comic shop all the time. And I would just, you know, I was working then, like, you know, I was a teenager, I'm in high school, I'm working. I would take money that I had, I'd go to the comic shop. Any free time I had, I'd be at the comic shop, reading back issues, talking to the owner, buying stuff, whatever. And that was, you know, early 90s. And then I moved on and got out of the hobby. And right when I got out of the hobby, the internet comes along. And that's been, you know, chugging along for decades. Now I'm back in the hobby and the internet's here and it's a whole new ballgame. Now there's auction sites, now there's research, now there's YouTube, now there's social media.
Don't forget about all of the dreams that you and I had as children about television and film have come true.
Yes.
I mean, oh my gosh. What, like in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined that I'd be able to go to the theater and see the type of movies, that I'd be able to sit in my house and watch the type of television shows that are just routinely popping out One of the things I meant to ask you, and again, I apologize if you've got to go and we got to wrap this up. You
No,
just
we're
let me
good.
know.
We got a few more
Okay.
minutes.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, there were so many announcements with San Diego Comic-Con and D23 for Marvel, right? And it was like there were so many books that got attention that none of them really went crazy. They all just saw a little bit of incremental growth. Maybe at the tip top high end, you saw the prices really accelerate, or like entry level copies. But a lot of them have come back down to earth. And we've seen that again and again with television too. Do you think we're entering into a market where people are going to have to focus on the quality of the books and the quality of the picks that they're making, as opposed to low-hanging fruit and media deals? Because that's the market I dreamed of, and I feel like we're like that. There's so much content on television, so much content in film, that's just a part of it, and not like the value driver. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think, look, you can't watch a commentator or YouTube channel about comic book investing without it having to do with movie speculation. So the two are so closely tied together right now, but I think it's a little bit unhealthy in the degree that it's connected. Look, there's always things in the environment that will affect values of investments and assets and collectibles. And it's a variety of things. And those variety of things may change from time to time. But whenever you attach so much importance to one aspect in the environment as so controlling over the value of a collectible or an asset, you're setting up a bubble, is what's going on. And right now, with movie spec and things being optioned and TV shows and Netflix series and all that stuff being the end all be all of what to buy and how, and that's what determines value of books. It's unhealthy, and it's not an accurate way to fully and fairly gauge the value of an asset. It creates artificial pops in value and some temporary interest. But if you're in this for, even a year-long term of investing or flipping or collecting, you've got to look into other factors that affect this other than just movie spec. And there's something called variant fatigue, which I mentioned. I think we're starting to reach a point, the early stages of what I think is movie spec fatigue. I'm not the only one. I mentioned this recently to several people, how I'm getting just exhausted with hearing movie spec every time we're hearing like top 10 books to collect, and it's top 10 movies that are coming out is essentially the same thing.
I couldn't agree more.
And there's other people that are starting to, there's little pockets of resistance popping up with this. And at a certain point, I think a lot of this is going to wear thin on people, and it's not going to have an effect anymore because there's so much of it. People get fatigued by it. And, what drives comic book collectability is several things. And one is rarity, which has nothing to do with movies or TV shows, is rarity. People like to have things that are rare. Another one is substantive content, quality stories and characters, stuff that people really enjoy. Saga #1 is a solid collectible with good investment value going forward. People love that story. It's what's in those pages is valued, and that makes the book valuable. Historic nature, first appearances, historic, the first cover by somebody, the first appearance of a character, Claremont and Byrne working together. There's certain things like that. Kirby and Ditko, and the first appearance of characters. These are historical aspects. So these are all things that affect the collectibles. Movies just cause a temporary pop because people think it's going to cause a temporary pop. There's nothing real substantive behind it. Now, occasionally, some of those things, like any number of other things, will bring something of value into the light and help people recognize it and be exposed to it and learn how good it is that it stands on its own. And it's yet to be determined if stuff like Eternals will do that. Maybe Eternals is such a good story with characters that people just ignored for so long.
Ever
that
read
the
those
movie
books?
came to the light. Huh?
Do you ever read those books?
No, I haven't. But
Yeah. We'll see if you change your mind if you ever try. No, I
perhaps.
loved The Boys. I loved Umbrella Academy. I thought that like they did an exceptional job. Let's hope they relaunch the Eternals with some new authors. You know, Blue
Yeah.
Marvel is a really good story. I don't know if it'll ever get made, but yeah. And what you're talking about, it's not as if I agree 100 fucking percent. I think most people do that are shrewd about comics, even if they don't. I think intuitively they agree, even if they don't know that they explicitly agree yet. But it's not as if any of us aren't thrilled about the nature of like Marvel comics being on, you know, Disney Plus or on the big screen. I mean, elated, right? Just the interrelationship between key books and, you know, movie and TV spec is like the single greatest value driver is dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, it's dangerous. It just is. Next week, I'm going to have one of the biggest, maybe the biggest, like movie, I don't know what the hell you call them, tipsters, insider, thingamabob guys. Yeah, he's like a big deal. And I don't know. I mean, I'll talk to him about all of these things. But what I won't tell anybody to do is go fucking buy any of those comics under any goddamn circumstances. Not
I'll tell you,
one.
I flip a lot of books that are up in value because of movie spec, but it's not like I'm running out to invest in Morbius books or ASM 101 because of that trailer that just hit. But if I find an ASM 101 now, I know it goes for a little more today than it did yesterday, so I can flip it. But I'm super looking forward to seeing that movie. I love the Marvel movies. I even love the ones that people hate, like the new X-Men, the Apocalypse, First Class, Days of Future Past. I love the movies. I'm so glad they're doing them. I love the comics. The movies and the shows have some effect on it in reality and some legit factor overall, but not to the degree that everybody is attaching to these things. The Eternals, if Eternals lives and dies on the movie, then it's going to die because it'll be hot while the movie. This is why
excited about. I might be the only guy who's still excited about the Eternals.
That's the one I'm most excited about. It's a cool sci-fi story. I'm most excited about the Eternals, but it's not because of the. You know, I'm not going to run out and stock up on Eternals books for the next decade.
Yeah, my buddy said the Gaiman run's pretty good. My reading the old Kirby stuff was just kind of like the most painful misadventure I've had in a long time, but you know, we'll see how that goes. And I won't keep you, my friend. I'm excited about so much in comics, and it's just been a joy to talk to you about the books that make the hobby so great. Thank you for spending this time with us. Is there anything that you'd like to say to people before we tune out? I certainly would like for you to give them information about where they can find you on IG, on YouTube, and so forth, because I know if people spent the time to watch this show with the two of us, then they're certainly going to want to hear more about your take on the market and some of the books that you have to offer.
Yeah, and I sell a lot of books, and I also talk about a lot of books that I own personally, so I'm pretty involved in all areas of the hobby. The best place to keep track of what I do in the hobby and to connect with me is on Instagram, and it's at DSComicsPCH, all one word, and that's on Instagram, at DSComicsPCH is the best way. But I have a YouTube channel that puts out less content than I do on Instagram, and that's just DS Comics. So yeah, look for both. And I do some fun stuff on my YouTube channel. I do auctions. I do them in a couple of the live shows we talked about tonight. Instagram, I post almost daily. I interact with people daily. And I am always buying and selling books and showing stuff off and talking about whatever. So yeah, I encourage anybody to hit me up, and yeah, always down for making more friends in the hobby. So, and I really appreciate you having me on, man. This has really been a blast. Really
the pleasure is mine. Thank you, my friend, and thank you for all who've joined us. We appreciate it.